What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Super Bowl. Final look.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over each position and break down a couple of my favorite players for this NFL DFS main slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Super Bowl, the big game is finally here. So let's take a final look at this slate, starting with the quarterback position. So out of these two quarterbacks, I mean, it's a coin flip here. You got Matthew Stafford from the LA Rams, Joe Burrow from the Cincinnati Bengals, both around the same DraftKings salary, only $200 apart. Matthew Stafford is $10,800 DraftKings salary. Joe Burrow is $10,600 DraftKings salary. Both these guys pretty much average 22 fantasy points per game on the season, both getting about 2 rush attempts per game. And it looks like Matthew Stafford has a better matchup on paper here. The Cincinnati Bengals have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing quarterbacks. And Joe Burrow facing the Rams, they've got a tougher defense, and they've been a little more stingy versus quarterbacks. Now, between these two quarterbacks, I do like Matthew Stafford. He's going to be about 53% owned compared to Joe Burrow, who's going to be about 46% owned. And the reason for this, because I have a wide receiver that I really want to match up with Matthew Stafford. And no, it's not Cooper Kupp, although I will play some Matthew Stafford Cooper Kupp lineups. So Matthew Stafford has scored 24, 32, and 24 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And in those games, he got 5, 4, and 6 rush attempts, compared to Joe Burrow, who scored 22, 16, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And in those games, he got 5, 2, and 2 rush attempts. So based on the past 3 games of the playoffs, looks like Matthew Stafford is scoring more fantasy points, got a little more upside. He is projected a little bit lower than Joe Burrow here at 20.7 fantasy points, where Joe Burrow is projected at 21.4 fantasy points. Now, Vegas thinks there's going to be 48.5 points scored in this game, with the Rams favored by 4. So maybe that's why Joe Burrow is projected a little more here, because could be a passing game script for the Rams if they fall behind a touchdown or 2 touchdowns even. But I do like Matthew Stafford a little bit more here. I'm going to pay the $200 more for Matthew Stafford. So I like Matthew Stafford here versus the Cincinnati Bengals.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. Only 2 running backs I'm looking to play on this slate. So the stud running back on this slate, he is a little bit overpriced on DraftKings, but it looks like he's got the most upside in the running back position. That's Joe Mixon from the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Rams got a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing running backs. Joe Mixon has averaged 18.6 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 18.3 rush attempts per game, 3 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 38% owned, projected at 21.6 fantasy points here in the Super Bowl. He's $9,600 DraftKings salary. So quite a price to pay for Joe Mixon, but he does have the big upside The biggest upside running back on the slate. He could definitely score 20, even 30 fantasy points if he gets going. Now, I don't know if I'm going to pay up for a ton of Joe Mixon. I'll probably have him in a lineup. So I do like Joe Mixon here versus the Rams. But if you want to save some salary at the running back position, take a look at Cam Akers from the LA Rams. Now, Cam Akers has only scored 6, 8, and 11 fantasy points in the last 3 games, but he's getting a lot of volume. He got 13, 24, and 17 rush attempts in the last 3 games, and on top of 1, 3, and 2 pass targets. So that's a lot of volume for only 6,400 DraftKings salary. He's going to be about 35% owned, and he does have the better matchup here. The Cincinnati Bengals have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, give up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So I like Cam Akers here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, moving on to the running back position. So the stud on the slate, well, there's 2 studs, but the super stud, the stud of the year, this guy's just been phenomenal all season long, is Cooper Kupp from the LA Rams playing the Cincinnati Bengals. And Cooper Kupp has averaged 27.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 11.2 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 72% owned, projected at 30.8 fantasy points here in the Super Bowl. He's 11,600 DraftKings salary. Now, Cooper Kupp has scored 40, 35, and 17 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 14, 11, and 7 pass targets. So it's going to be hard to build a lineup without Cooper Kupp, because this guy could be a slate breaker. So if you don't have him, you just might not be able to place in the money. Now, if he does have an off game and your lineup doesn't have Cooper Kupp, that's going to put you way ahead of the field. So if I'm building, let's say 4 lineups, probably 3 of those would have Cooper Kupp and 1 of them would not. I think that's the safe way to play it here on this slate. So if you're building 10 lineups, 7 of them would have Cooper Kupp and 3 of them would not, maybe even 8 of them with Cooper Kupp and 2 of them without. But I would just stick to that, the ownership ratio for Cooper Kupp to protect yourself, about that 75% ownership rate. So I like Cooper Kupp here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the other stud on the slate, this guy has just been big time wide receiver. He's been catching balls that he shouldn't be catching. He's been really excelling in the playoffs. So I like Jamar Chase from the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's averaged 18.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.5 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 46% owned, projected at 22.2 fantasy points here in the Super Bowl. He's 10,400 DraftKings salary, and he scored 18, 19, and 26 fantasy points in his last 3 games off of 9, 6, and 12 pass targets. So he's been super productive, and if the Cincinnati Bengals do fall behind in this game and it turns into a passing game script, he could rack up a ton of fantasy points in this one. So I like Jamar Chase here versus the LA Rams. Now, although they did price him up a little bit for the Super Bowl because his performance has been stepping up in the playoffs, I like this play. He has the best wide receiver cornerback matchup on the slate, and we'll take a look at those matchups in just a minute. So it's Odell Beckham Jr. from the LA Rams, and Odell Beckham Jr. has scored 23, 13, and 17 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 11, 8, and 4 pass targets. He's going to be about 36% owned, projected at 18.2 fantasy points here in the Super Bowl. He's 8,400 DraftKings salary.
Real quick guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL, MLB is still going, NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
So I like Odell Beckham Jr. here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. And what I like about Odell Beckham Jr. is he loves the bright lights. I keep saying this, but this guy excels under pressure. So I am expecting a special performance from him in the Super Bowl, especially with Cooper Kupp taking all that coverage. And like I said, he does have the best wide receiver cornerback matchup on the slate. So he could have a monster game here in the Super Bowl. So I like Odell Beckham Jr. here, especially to save a little bit of salary coming off of those studs. Now, other quarterbacks on the slate, you got T. Higgins, but he's $7,600 DraftKings salary. I think I would just prefer to pay up a little bit for Odell Beckham Jr. I think T. Higgins is a fine play. He's going to be about 41% owned. If I were to pick one player that was a little bit, the ownership is a little bit too high, and the salary was a little bit too high, it'd probably be T. Higgins, because you got Odell Beckham Jr. for not much more. And then you could go with Tyler Boyd and save a ton of salary. Now, I know Tyler Boyd hasn't put up big numbers the past couple of games, but he's been pretty solid all season long. So Tyler Boyd from the Cincinnati Bengals has averaged 11.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.9 pass targets per game. It's going to be about 30% owned, projected at 11.3 fantasy points here in the Super Bowl. He's $5,400 DraftKings salary, and he only scored 6, 4, and 13 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 6, 3, and 5 pass targets. So that's why his salary and his ownership are down. But this guy really did have a pretty good season, and you're gonna have to save some salary somewhere. So you're probably gonna be looking at a guy like Tyler Boyd to save some salary, or a guy like Van Jefferson from the LA Rams, who's averaged 9.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.2 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 24% owned, projected at 9.8 fantasy points here in the Super Bowl. He's $5,200 DraftKings salary. Now, he was injured, and he's going to play this game. He wasn't practicing for about a week or so, so I don't think he's going to be as fresh as the other guys, but he should be fine. He had plenty of time to get over that injury. Now, he only scored 3, 6, and 5 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 5, 3, and 1 pass target. So if you're going to pay down at the wide receiver to save some salary in your lineup, I definitely prefer Tyler Boyd at $5,400. But Van Jefferson at $5,200, both of those guys are going to be your salary-saving wide receiver plays. So while we're still on the wide receiver position, let's go and take a look at the wide receiver cornerback matchups. So you can see here that Odell Beckham Jr., he's got the best cornerback matchup on the slate. The cornerback that's going to be covering him, Chidobe Awuzie, he gives up 0.39 fantasy points per route run against. And the second best cornerback matchup is Cooper Kupp, going to be covered by Mike Hilton, who gives up 0.33 fantasy points per route. And then the worst cornerback matchup is Van Jefferson, going to be matched up with Eli Apple, who's only giving up 0.24 fantasy points per route run against. That's why I do prefer Tyler Boyd here to save some salary at the wide receiver position. And that's why I love Odell Beckham Jr. in this game. On top of saving a little bit of salary with some monster upside. He also has the best cornerback wide receiver matchup on the slate. But moving on to the tight end position, you got an injured tight end for the LA Rams. Let's just take a look at this. Tyler Higbee will not play in the Super Bowl. So you've got Kendall Blanton from the LA Rams at 4,600 DraftKings salary. And he's only going to be about 14% owned. He does have a good tight end matchup. The Cincinnati Bengals give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. So if you're looking for a sleeper pick, that would be Kendall Blanton from the LA Rams filling in for Tyler Higbee. Not a lot of people are going to be playing Kendall Blanton, and maybe he gets a touchdown here and could be the difference maker on this slate. But the guy that I like, who was a full participant in practice, so it looks like he's going to play, is CJ Uzoma from the Cincinnati Bengals. He's going to be about 20% owned, and he's 4,400 DraftKings salary. He scored 14 and 18 fantasy points in his last 2 games before he got injured, off of 8 and 6 pass targets. So I like CJ Uzoma. I mean, these tight ends, both of these guys are going to be your dart throw plays if you're looking to make your lineup different and differentiate your lineup. Not a lot of love for these tight ends on this slate, but I think I would sprinkle them into some lineups because it doesn't take much to hit value. Just on a single game slate, a touchdown could do it and be the difference in your lineup. So out of these 2 guys, I would prefer CJ Uzoma here versus the LA Rams.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.